Katie G and Kirsty Trupp, two 18-year-old volunteers from the UK, were attacked with acid in Zanzibar, Tanzania, on August the 7th of 2013. According to the victims, two men drove past them in the street on a small motorcycle and threw a corrosive liquid onto their heads and chests. Due to the severity of their injuries, Trupp and G were airlifted to a hospital in the Tanzanian capital for medical treatment. Although it was theorized that the attack might have been religiously motivated, authorities didn't issue an official statement on the matter, and no arrests were made as of December of 2022. Trupp required skin grafts to her face, arms, and shoulders, but her injuries weren't as severe as G's. While she was able to continue her studies, G had 30% of her body scorched by the acid. She lost an ear and spent 2 months in the hospital upon returning to the UK. When she was allowed to return home, she underwent physiotherapy 5 times a week and was required to wear pressure suits and face masks to aid in the rehabilitation process. Number 10. Anastasia Yalangskaya. On March the 4th of 2022, 26-year-old Anastasia Yalangskaya was gunned down by Russian soldiers while attempting to deliver food to an animal shelter in Bucha, Ukraine. The shelter, located 18 miles away from Kiev, had run out of food 3 days earlier. Yalanskaya was accompanied by 2 other volunteers whose names weren't released to the public. They'd managed to deliver the packages and were driving back to base when Russian troops opened fire on their vehicle, which was later discovered by the father of one of the volunteers riddled with bullets. Friends and families expressed their belief that the victims had been deliberately attacked by Russian soldiers at close range, even though they were obviously civilians. Number 9. Jade Williams. On April the 16th of 2019, 18-year-old Jade Williams slapped parking officer David Henson after he issued her a citation for parking in a handicapped spot in Houston, Texas. 70-year-old Henson, who volunteered with the Houston Parking Enforcement Division, was quickly surrounded by Williams and her 2 companions, who berated him about issuing the ticket. The young woman proceeded to shove the elderly man against her car and deliver a hard slap across his face. According to Henson, Williams then challenged him to a fight, but he refused to engage and instead called 911. The assailant, on the other hand, claimed to have simply been reacting to unfairly receiving a ticket. Although she didn't have the proper permit sticker on the van she was driving, Williams was accompanied by her double amputee father, Byron, which she believed to have been proof enough of her handicapped parking authorization. She was arrested at the scene and charged with misdemeanor assault for the attack on Henson, who was left with a sprained knee as well as several scratches. Number 8. Ellie Rose Warren. A 20-year-old Australian volunteer was murdered by an unknown assailant in Tofo, Mozambique, sometime between the night of November the 8th of 2016 and the following morning. Ellie Rose Warren had reportedly been volunteering for Underwater Africa, a conservation program that allowed her to shadow marine biologists along the coast of Mozambique. She had last been seen celebrating the end of the 6-week program with friends. On the 9th of November, her body was discovered face down in the sand behind the public fresh water taps. The autopsy determined that Warren had died of asphyxiation caused by sand inhalation. The sand found in her lungs wasn't the same type found at the scene, however, indicating she'd been killed somewhere else before being taken to a secondary location. In spite of the evidence that seemed to suggest foul play of some sort, local police told the victim's family the death could have been accidental. Frustrated with the lack of progress in the investigation, Warren's father, Paul, decided to take matters into his own hands. He traveled to Africa to speak with potential witnesses who might have information regarding his daughter's suspicious death. The man reportedly uncovered that local authorities had hidden information regarding the crime, including the fact that the young woman's clothes had been ripped, as well as the possibility that her death had somehow been gang-related. Nevertheless, as of the latest available updates, the circumstances of Ellie Rose Warren's death remained a mystery. Number 7. Joshua Jones. After dying in battle in Donbass, Ukraine, On August the 26th of 2022, Joshua Jones's body was held by Russian authorities amidst a war crime investigation. The 24-year-old American had joined the Ukrainian Foreign Legion as a volunteer earlier that year. On October the 25th, his mother, Misty Gossett, was informed by the Ukrainian government that his body had been returned along with then prisoners of war. After extensive negotiations, CNN was able to film the moment the transfer took place. The family wasn't certain when they would be able to bury the soldier, as a second autopsy was still pending. Heartbroken by the delays, Gossett stated during an interview with NBC, "Every day this gets prolonged and we're just trying to put him to rest." Number 6. Catherine Kate Pousey. 24-year-old Catherine Kate Pousey, a Peace Corps volunteer, was killed in the West African country of Benin on March the 11th of 2009. Her body was found outside her home the following morning. Pousey had traveled with the Peace Corps to work as an English teacher in the small town of Bajud. Days before her death, she'd attempted to anonymously report a fellow teacher for abusing students, but her identity was eventually uncovered by the accused teacher, Constant Bio. The latter and his brother, Jacques Bio, were arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the aftermath. The victim's mother, Lois, stated that although the Peace Corps initially aided them in their efforts to obtain information about the case, the organization eventually seemed to close ranks. The family has campaigned for changes in whistleblower protection for Peace Corps volunteers in the wake of the murder. Number 5. Jennifer Buckley. Jesuit volunteer Jennifer Buckley, aged 24, was stabbed to death during a break-in at her residence in Pangantucan, Bukidnon, on August the 23rd of 2019. Her roommate at the boarding house, 30-year-old Anne Kathleen Getdula, survived the attack but had to undergo surgery to repair the damage caused by her severe injuries. Both women volunteered as teachers at a local community high school. Police suspected that the assailant, who remained unidentified as of the latest updates, might have broken into the boarding house to rob them. After plunging a knife into Buckley's chest, abdomen, and back, and stabbing Getdula once in the stomach, the attacker fled the scene. 10 days before the murder, the victims had reported that their IDs and money had gone missing from their room, but investigators weren't able to determine whether the incidents were connected. Number 4. Louise Hucks. South Australian volunteer firefighter Louise Hucks died after being struck by a falling tree while responding to a forest fire on January the 20th of 2022. Hucks, who was 44 at the time, had started volunteering for the fire department 28 years prior to the fatal accident when she was just a teenager. She also provided mental health assistance to other first responders through a stress prevention program. Over 150 firefighters worked alongside Hucks throughout the night to put out the flames, and the efforts would continue the following week with over 9,000 acres of land affected by the blaze. Another volunteer was also severely hurt in the accident but received a positive prognosis after being rushed to the hospital. More than 600 people gathered to pay their respects to Hucks during her funeral, and South Australian fire stations lowered the precinct's flags to half-mast in her honor. Number 3. Scott Sibley. 36-year-old British soldier Scott Sibley died in southern Ukraine on April the 22nd of 2022 while volunteering to fight against the Russian occupation of the territory. Sibley, who joined the International Brigade of Ukraine on March the 13th, had spent 3 days in a foxhole along with his unit when the area was targeted by enemy fire. The soldiers noticed a heat-sensing drone flying over the area just before it unleashed a brutal attack. Sibley was struck by mortar fire, dying instantly from penetrating fragment injuries to his chest and stomach. An autopsy revealed he wouldn't have been able to survive the ordeal, even if immediate medical aid had been available. He became the first UK soldier to die during the conflict in Ukraine. Today's topic was requested by Patrick Marsh, Hal Koenig, and Jay Peters. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comment section below. Number 2. Hagar Geffen. 70-year-old Hagar Geffen was viciously beaten on October the 19th of 2022 for recording masked settlers attacking harvesters in Kisan, Palestine. Geffen was one of several Israeli volunteers accompanying local farmers in an attempt to dissuade extremist attacks. When they reached their harvest of olive trees, however, they realized the crops had been dosed with herbicide, and most of the trees had already been picked clean of their fruits. As the farmers and volunteers attempted to salvage the grove with water, a group of people armed with machetes, rods, and other makeshift weapons rushed toward them. Geffen managed to hide from view initially and tried recording the attack, but she was eventually spotted. The assailants began throwing stones and beating her with clubs, stealing her cell phone in the process. Geffen was taken to the hospital with numerous injuries, including a broken hand, cracked ribs, a punctured lung, and contusions. Number 1. Craig McIntosh. Craig McIntosh, a British resident volunteering on the Ukraine war front, was killed in the line of duty on August 24th of 2022. The 48-year-old man was on patrol when his squad was ambushed in Kharkiv. It was reported as McIntosh's second time volunteering to aid in the war effort, having offered his services to the Ukrainian army back in March of the same year. McIntosh's sister Lorna launched a GoFundMe page asking for help in bringing the body back to the United Kingdom. Though the desired sum was $4,000, people continued donating well after the goal was already reached, with many expressing a determination to help the McIntosh family in their time of need. Thanks for watching. Would you rather volunteer as a soldier for the Ukrainian army or as a nurse in a Chinese hospital filled with COVID patients? Let us know in the comments section below.